it's going to have different, probably a different flavor, a different effect, a different appearance even.
Hey, you guys, so to break this down even further, terroir is actually a wine term, or I believe it is a wine term. So this is actually an example from a wine business or company, so that they made this chart. I can't take credit. But here are some examples and specific details as to what makes terroir so important and what makes terroir. All right, diving back into it.
So that's why it's important to understand these landrace strains. It's even more important to understand the genetics and like the parent genetics and how it was grown, and the environment it was grown. What was it, indoor grown? Was it out, sun grown? All of these things have an impact on the plant itself. But even more important is that people who might not be familiar with specific genetics or just kind of how strains work nowadays, like everything is bred very differently. So it's important to kind of like, where you go and walk into a dispensary and you see something that's named like, it's got Kush in the name, right? Because a lot of strains have Kush in the name. A lot of strains have gelato in the name, but there's several different kinds of gelato. There's several different kinds of Kush, because there's several different ways that it's been grown, and it's been crossed with several different kinds of different genetics. So it's not going to be the same Kush most likely that you're familiar with. It's not going to be the same gelato most likely that you have experience with in the past.
So here we have another chart to kind of help explain what we were just talking about. As you see with the F1 generation, BC1 generation here, we're kind of seeing the generations unfold and unravel and expand into different versions of themselves as they're crossed with different strains. So as one strain is crossed with another, it's turning into a different version of itself. So that's why it's so important that when you try a new strain, you look at the history of the parent genetics and the overall, strains that it was crossed with, so you have a much better idea of the effects and the flavor profile before you try it.
So it's really important that you familiarize yourself with the strain that you intend to consume. Ask as many questions as possible, especially if you know the person that's growing it. Just the more that you can understand about how it was grown, the genetics, overall the terpenes, and of course the cannabinoids, the more of a coherent experience you're probably going to have, the more of a better idea of what the experience is going to be like before you consume.